Hey there, hi there, hello there, it's Jeff Cutter Down and welcome you to episode 3 of my Simpsons Unhinged um, thing. The first two episodes, we dealt with Lisa Goes Gaga, how it seems to be the worst episode ever, and how Lady Gaga basically, it was just a 30-minute commercial for her stuff. She doesn't help Lisa out. She kind of does help Lisa because she realizes she needs to release her anger instead of bottling it up. And then finally, Lady Gaga realizes Lisa's happy and leaves her alone. And last week we talked about that 90s show when we learned that Homer and Marge actually didn't have Bart after high school. There had to be a gap. And we learned that Homer goes to work for his dad so that Marge could go to university and then fall in love with Professor August, splitting them apart. Homer doing a very noble thing and giving Marge everything modern, and he keeps the old school stuff. And then when Professor August becomes a jerk, Marge runs back to Homer and all that. It was actually something that we know, a math thing. But anyway, today we are going to be taking a look at a season 19, season 24 episode. No, 17. Yeah, 24. We're going to look at a season 24 episode that you may not know about. It's called To Cure with Love. And this episode deals with the fact that Homer and Abe and the relationship between them were soured from the start, even as Homer was a child. And there was a backstory to it. So stay tuned. This is episode number 3. Jerk as Homer, Marge's worries, Bart's pranks, Lisa's causes, Maggie not talking a lot, Grandpa being senile, Patty and Selma boring Marge, Artie Sif is a jerk, Chief Wiggum making things happen, Mr. Burns being a dick. You can never stop the Simpsons. Heaven knows they've been trying for years and they still come back for more. 37 seasons is a bit much, don't you think? It's a crazy Simpsons. Something happens. A do 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 do. This is not a clip show. Have no fear. I've got topics for years. As you can see in the image, you see a young Homer with a dog. This is the premise of this episode, number 3 in my Unhinged series, which I go one episode per season. It doesn't have to be the best or the worst episode, it just has to be one that catches my eye and all that. So, anyway, this episode, To Curb With Love, has Abe Simpson having to move back into the Simpson house because of an accident that ruins the retirement home. At the same time, Homer, who was injured at work, actually finds a tablet game similar to Farmville and plays it, but somehow he neglects Santa's little helper and he disappears. Homer doesn't care about it, and then when Santa's little helper is found inside the pantry, Bart snaps at Homer saying that, you didn't take care of Santa's little helper. You never liked Santa's little helper. And Homer says, well, I mean, I'm not a dog person. Now, Homer was kind of a little bit awkward and didn't know if he wanted to take Santa's little helper home in, the first ever episode, saying he's pathetic, he's weak, he's a loser. And then Santa's little helper looks at him, he's a Simpson. Now, Homer has had some moments in which he's neglected Santa's little helper, so Bart's not off. One major example was when Santa's little helper had to have stomach surgery and the Simpsons had to make sacrifices. Marge had to stop buying her lottery ticket, which actually blew up in her face because she could have shared in like a $200,000 jackpot, which would have saved the family, would have given them their money back and more. Maggie outgrows her clothes, so she has to be in a Crown Royal bag. Lisa can't buy certain encyclopedias, and when you know it, Copernicus comes up as the next topic, and she has to find a third-rate coffee on a bus. Bart has to have his hair cut by Springfield Barbers College, and they gouge him. And Homer has to dance for his beer money. So the resentment. But thankfully, though, Bart saves the day. Nevertheless, Grandpa actually tells the family that, yeah, Homer actually was a dog person at one point. So around the time that Homer was a toddler and all that, he was having troubles. And then Bongo, for some reason, decides to coo him to sleep, like howl him to sleep, but he coos and all that. And so Abe and Mona can get together. But Abe, all he wanted to do was watch Mannix. And then, even though that Bongo was Homer's best friend and shared in everything, including Bongo actually saving Homer from a test by pulling a fire alarm, and then they do something with a burning house or something. I don't remember what it could, but anyhow, they were two of hearts. Unfortunately, though, Mona decides to leave Abe. Of course, this is changing canon because we all know that in Mother Simpson, we find out that Mona leaves Abe because of a nuclear thing, but Mona leaves Abe seemingly on her own accord and while he watches Mannix. It's like, how did that picture even happen? Nevertheless, Homer and Abe were stuck together. But then later on at a event, which a younger Mr. Burns and looks like Smithers, but that's not really Waylon Smithers, that's Waylon Smithers Sr. Yes, we already talked about that's in the Blender years. When we find out that Smithers' father actually saves the town from a meltdown, but Burns, in a cover up mode, tells Smithers Jr. that his father was taken in by Amazonian women, and basically it may have turned Smithers gay. Who knows? But nevertheless, I mean, they wanted to put the nuclear power plant in Springfield and would hand out toys to the kids and all that so that he could get the grant to do so. Homer looks at the toy and then decides to give it to Bongo, but Mr. Burns snaps, saying that, those those are people toys. You ingrate, and slaps Homer. Unfortunately, Bongo sees this and bites Mr. Burns heavily. Abe gets Bongo off of Mr. Burns and apologizes, but Mr. Burns says that I will be happy once I get that dog twitching in my arms. Unfortunately, though, it's in front of kids, and Mr. Burns tries to get Krusty to take over the show, but since Krusty's material is for adults, he brings Mr. Teeny, but the predecessor to Mr. Teeny, who was a big gorilla, and Krusty says, next time I'm getting a smaller monkey. So anyway, Bungo and Homer were in danger. Abe knew it, but Homer didn't. So Abe manages to get Homer and Bungo into a car before the dog catcher could catch him. And who was the dog catcher? None other than Clancy Wiggum, who had Lou chaperone him while he was chaperoning Lou for the Big Brother program. They both failed to catch the dog. Lou says, well, you know what? My dream is to be police chief. And then Wiggum basically says, oh, no, you don't. That's my dream. And then Lou says, maybe I'll be a spokesperson like Ralph Abernathy. Ralph, I like that name. And then Bart writes down, man, this story takes down some holes. And in in the car chase, Abe accidentally knocks Herman's arm off, who was going to piano school, and he says that he will open up a war store. And then Marge questions Grandpa's story, saying, how do you know about this? He wrote a book about it. Herman wrote a book called Farewell to Arm, when he lost his arm. Nelson writes stuff about being a bully. Willie talks about his alcoholism. And Dr. Hibbert released a book saying, crying from the inside. As you know, he's jovial at the outside, the Bill Cosby type. We don't talk about that. So anyway, Bongo can't be found. So Abe decides to bring Bongo upstate to their old neighbor, Miss Viola, who had a partner who Abe thought was a guy, but it's a woman. That happened in the 60s. So anyway, Homer is upset that Bongo has to go. The women are crying, like Lisa and Marge are crying, even Bart's crying. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Can we finish this up? I got a hockey game tonight. I think he was cry laughing at Homer's misery and all that. That's what Bart does. So anyway, Grandpa brings it up, and then he has to face Mr. Burns. Of course, Burns confronts Abe. with a sleepy, drugged out Homer. And Burns wants to know, where's my dog? Abe says he's gone. He's now upstate. You'll never catch him. And Burns is not too happy with what happened. So he decides to punish Abe by forcing him to work in his kennels for his guard dogs. And also will force Abe to wear nothing more than just a raggedy sweater, a bolo tie, and slippers for not bringing him Bongo and all that. So Grandpa works for Mr. Burns. The worst part was that it tore the relationship between Homer and Abe apart. Basically, Homer would not trust Abe and all that. So that's what ends up happening and all that. So anyhow, you know, Grandpa gets the big punishment. He had to work for Burns, and he also had Homer basically resent him. Homer tells the story that was not the end of the story. He then says a couple of months later he went to rescue Bongo back from Miss Viola, but unfortunately, after seeing how happy Bongo was with them, Homer was upset, and Homer basically decided that dogs are not that loyal. Some dogs are, some dogs aren't. So then he decided to hate dogs forever and basically think that loyalty just wasn't there. And of course, as the title of the episode says, dogs and apes can't be trusted. So Homer basically had resentment towards both groups. He only keeps Hansel Helper, I guess, because of the happiness of Marge, Lisa, and Bart and Maggie. However, Grandpa shares a picture. And the picture is that, Bongo sleeps on an old sweatshirt that Homer gave to him. That Bongo didn't forget about Homer. Homer realizes that he's been hating on Abe for no damn reason and forgives him and basically sleeps on the couch with Abe. And they have a dream in which Homer walks on his law helper. Abe walks on his law helper. Homer walks Bongo. Burns and his guard dog walks his guard dogs. And Krusty walks big boy Mr. Teeny. So that's just practically your episode right there and then. But of course, the big story is about Homer and Abe's mistrust towards each other. It's not a secret. For 37 years, Homer has been resenting Abe. There have been times in which Homer has been helping Abe out, but the resentment is there. And can you blame Homer? Not completely. There were episodes after this year. Well, this was season 24 when it came out. So 13 years ago, this came out. And then, we find out there's been a few episodes in which Abe has been really resentful towards Homer and all that. One time, Abe found a old box of recipes that Mona would send to Homer while she was on the run, but Abe tore them up in a fit of rage. Kind of mad at Mona and Homer. That made Homer really mad at Abe. Anyway, there was another episode that came to my mind, but I can't remember about that. Nevertheless, Homer and Abe's relationship was pretty strained. It goes back to Mother Simpson in season 7. I don't know if that will be the season 7 one. I have to find out. But the fact of the matter is that Abe lied to Homer about Mona's disappearance. Homer loved his mother. His mother loved him. Basically, it was great. And then, Abe was not so great towards Homer. I mean, Homer was a handful, yeah, but Abe basically sowed the seeds of Homer's resentment and also may have passed down the fatherly anger, as Homer has been terrible towards Bart. However, in a episode I know I'm going to do one of these days, we learned that sometimes Bart asks for it, but that'll be for another day. So, yeah, he didn't tell where Mona was. Mona tried to connect with care packages, but Homer never tipped his mail carrier, so that's why he never got the packages. But I mean, Homer was like what 7 or 8 when they disappeared. When Mona disappeared, I guess the mail carriers were mad at 8 instead of Homer. But the fact of the matter is that Bart and Homer have a bad relationship, and it starts with Homer and Abe. Abe just doesn't trust Homer, and neither does Homer. Homer puts Abe in a retirement home, maybe as revenge or psychological revenge. In the in the days of future past, the one that was supposed to be the series finale, if the contract negotiations weren't happening, we find out that Homer puts Abe in the cryogenic thing just to punish him for, he would badmouth Homer's decisions. Even marrying Marge was a bad decision. But it just goes to prove that Homer has trust issues. Lots of people do. It's no problem. I mean, we all go through it, even myself. But the fact is that Homer and Grandpa just had a relationship that was very frayed and all that. And this was the catalyst. Bongo being gone and Homer never knowing the truth in a sense, but learning that Bongo seemed to be unrelenting and basically did not trust Homer. Homer figured that dogs were just as disloyal as Grandpa was. He has a point. But the fact of the matter is that this is one of the times when Homer learns that he was in the wrong for hating Grandpa. But there have been plenty of other things why he hates him. All right, so that's that episode. So next week, we go to a famous season 3 episode in which it actually did the impossible. It beat The Cosby Show in the ratings. Yeah, I know lots of people don't want to talk about The Cosby Show because you know why. But the fact of the matter is, next week we talk about the season 3 episode that beat The Cosby Show, sent it to a partial tailspin, and brought The Simpsons into more prominence. And of course, it's a sports themed episode, so I will be a little biased and maybe overanalyze. So that'll be next Saturday, February 14th. I know it's Valentine's Day, but I can't really think of a love episode that makes things happen. Or maybe I do. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really into the Valentine's Day spirit. And also just to note that on the 16th, February 16th, it is a holiday in Ontario. So that means I don't have to work on the Monday. So you'll get a bonus Simpsons Unhinged. And it does not have to do with an episode, a season in particular. This will be doing with the best Olympics episode in Simpsons history. And I will be talking about this because, pack your bags on the 16th. We're headed to Canada's warmest city in the winter, Vancouver. And that's the truth. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.